Hello, good morning everybody. It's me again, International Master Sopiko Guramishvili here for you on Chess 24. If you've seen my last Banter Blitz, I promised you that I'm going to be here a little spy here in Georgia for the Tbilisi World Cup 2017. So I'm keeping my promise, and this show is going to be about the round one, and I can tell you that I'm going to do a recap of each round after every tiebreak. As you know, in round one it will be after 3 days, because round one 2 games are played. Then if it is 1-1, then it is tie break. So after tie breaks I'm going to be here again and review the games. So let's before I start actually the show, I'd like to remind you about the Chess 24 promotion. It's a great chance to buy the annual premium membership now. Mail your favorite player to the support at chess24.com, and if your player advances, then you will get free month all the time he will advance. So if you pick up, let's say, Magnus Carlsen, then if he advances in round 2, round 3, you will get 3 months, 3 free months, 4 3 months, etc., and so on and so on. I am actually able to read the comments, so make sure you, if you have some questions, ask. If you're interested, how's the situation, the hotel, the playing hall, I'm gonna tell you everything, because I'm going there every day. I stay at my family's place and I'm going to the playing hall every day, which is quite far, but of course it's such an event, the strongest World Cup in history, that I'm not going to miss it. Not only I, but I'm taking also our little boy Daniel to support Daddy, and we wish him good luck. And we are definitely looking forward for the games round 2. You already know that 64 players left the tournament hall and the hotel, and probably the country as well, and there were many interesting games. I chose some games which wouldn't be covered in the articles, because it is the very important event, and of course you can find many articles on Chess 24 or any other websites, and I decided to show you something that wouldn't be covered, because you could read those articles on like yesterday or 2 days ago. Anyway, I am going to review the round 1. Now I read the comment, who really cares what it is like in the hotel? Well, you guys don't care, but it is very important for the players, how are the conditions, and I can assure you that it is very nice hotel, very nice playing hall. There are lots of spectators always, and you can watch the live commentary as well on the website. So I think Giorgio took good care of the players. And okay, now let's talk about the conditions, and let's start the let's go to the games. I want to show you how our top guys did, because not all of them had great time in round 1 or 2. Some even offered to draw in back position. So let's go to it. Actually, before I start to showing you the games, I want to remind you that this is a knockout system, so you play only 2 games, and it is very important. One bad move, one bad day is enough to be out of the tournament and to have no chance for the title. So there is a huge psychological pressure and huge pressure on a player generally. When you're playing a normal tournament, you always have a chance to recover, to bounce back, but this is not the tournament where you can hope for bouncing back or hope for recovering, because there are only 2 games. And it is really very important that you play good and that you take care of the points. So I'd like to start the show, of course, with the world champion game, Magnus Carlsen, who was playing against Balogh. And let's see the position. I'm not going to go from the beginning, but I'd like to show you the position where I think it was important moment. Black player played a very, very interesting game, and he was holding for a long time, and it was kind of a closed position, and we thought that if you look at the position, you might think like, okay, it's really close, so what can white do? And actually, this is the exact position where the world champion is very, very strong. And when you think that it's not going to be it's going to be an easy play for black, then our world champion finds the plans, the motives, and wins just like this. Okay, a5 was played in the game, and it is very important decision here that black has to make. To go b5 or to take on a5. If we look at the position, taking on a5 looks a bit like why I have to take on a5, because it ruins my structure, and after, let's say, b takes a5, knight takes a5, my pawn on a6 would be weak, and white would have an easy play on a file, so why would I do that? But actually here black has a very, very concrete plan, and it is rook h4. Rook h4, the idea of rook h4 is that I want to go rook h8, and let's say white plays something like c4. Also, it's possible to play knight c6, but after rook h8, rook h4, and g takes h4, rook a6 is not good, because after h3 you cannot come back rook a1, because not h2 and rook h1, it is also possible and it also wins. But the main idea is to go knight h7, and after rook h1, knight g5 and c4, knight h4, black is going to win the f3 pawn, and this is completely winning for black. So as black, you shouldn't be afraid to lose the a6 pawn, because you have the h pawn and it is very strong passed pawn. You always have counterattack on the f3 pawn. And I would like to ask the viewers, I would like to ask you guys, what kind of plan would you have in mind after, let's say, c4, rook h8, rook h4, knight h4, and knight b3? If there is no concrete plan, then black is of course worse, because the a6 pawn is hanging, white has 2 bishops, and the c5 break as well. So I'm gonna take a look at the chat, and I'm gonna see what is your opinion about this. Please do write in chat, what do you think black should play here? It is very, very important idea, and when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's really great. But actually in these positions, in this type of closed positions, if you have queens, this idea becomes very natural. And if you don't have queens, then it is tiny bit difficult to imagine that it works again. But definitely it does work, because yet these bishops on c2 and d2, they don't have much play, and black is using the opportunity to activate his pieces, and he's gonna get a great counterplay. So I'll take a look. What are you guys thinking? Please do write in chat. What are you thinking about this position? And in a minute, I will be telling you what is the great move here. I guess it's very difficult for now to guess this move, and as we have lots of games to cover, then I would not wait too long. And Fuchsia is saying that she doesn't see it. Yeah, it's tough. It's indeed very tough. But now I will reveal this move, and it is knight f3, a great sacrifice, which is very, very easy to miss. Maybe it would not even come to the mind, such sacrifices like knight f3, king f3, and there is no mate, nothing obvious, but black goes rook h4, and after rook h4, also rook h2 is possible. We want to mate, but after rook f1 and then rook h4, which is also possible, it would be same. But I think that after knight f3, king f3, rook h4 is more is stronger. And let's say here rook a6 would be too much because of rook h2. Now the rook left the first rank, and there is no rook f1, and white cannot really avoid mate on f2. So rook a6 doesn't work, and after, let's say, rook f1, rook h4, king f3, rook h4, and let's say c5 to create some counterplay, then knight g4, king e2, knight f2. Now, obviously, we are piece down, but we have these great pawns on f4 and g5, and also the bishops on d2 and c2. They are not doing much. They are closed with their own pawns, and we have very active pieces. The king is not safe as well, so it gives black great compensation. Let's say b5. After b5, ab5, and bishop a5, some idea to mess up the position a bit. Then rook h2, bishop c7, d takes c5, and you can take, of course, knight c5 back, but you can also go d6, knight g4, king d3, and c4 would be winning for black. After dc5, knight c5 is possible, but then black would take on e4, king d1, knight c3, king c1, and f3 with a very, very unclear position. Once again, I want to emphasize on this sacrifice, knight f3. As I mentioned, it is very easy to imagine these type of sacrifices when the queens are on board, But when the queens are not on board, you might think that for what I am playing, because there is no mate, we don't have queens, but this position actually proves that after knight f3, king f3 and rook h4, we don't really need to mate white king, but we can also play for compensation using the fact that white pieces are not active and we have very big threats on the king side. After rook a6, of course, is bad, but after let's say c5, knight g4, king e2 and knight f2, we have the rook h2 coming and g4, f3. It would be very difficult for white to continue the play here. Okay, let's go to another game. This was Magnus' first game, and the second game it was also very interesting. He won another game. It was an end game. The guy was playing very good. I mean, Balogh was playing very good, but at some point he made a blunder in the end game and lost the pawn, which of course is not the thing you should do against world champion. Then the game was quite easy for Magnus and he won easily 2-0 the match with 2-0. Anyhow, a great fight of Balogh. I really agree. He is a great fighter and he showed a very nice skills. Okay, let's go to the game of Vachier-Lagrave. I'm very sorry if I'm not pronouncing the surnames correctly. We have Maxime playing with white pieces, and this was a very interesting game because Maxime in the first game he somehow either gave the pawn in Grunfeld opening, either blundered it, and when he had already obviously worse position, he offered the draw, and of course his opponents accepted it because the things were not so obvious, and it was not very easy to convert this pawn. And when you have a chance to accept the draw offer from such player, such top player, world number 2, Vachier-Lagrave, Maxime, then you kind of don't want to continue the play. But of course, if you're more ambitious and if you're thinking about the qualification, then you kind of don't care who is sitting in front of you, and then you do everything to convert this game. Actually, I should say that that's a great plus for top players when they find themselves in a bit troubled situation. It's very natural to offer the draw because you kind of know that your opponent at least will be bothered afterwards if he doesn't accept the draw offer. Okay, so once again we have a psychological factor here. Opponent, much weaker opponent is playing a strong opponent, and it does not matter what kind of position he has. He's kind of happy to make a draw. In this position, Maxime already grabbed a little bit of advantage, I would say. His pieces are more naturally standing on the squares, and his move was Queen C1. Queen C1 has a very, very nice idea which was played in the game afterwards. It's not a move just like this. Why not, let's say, Queen D2 and Queen C1? The opponent here played Queen C8, and it was obviously a bad move. He should have played King H7, but anyhow, Maxime has better position because he has space. This D4 and E4 pawn are central pawns, so he has the center and all pieces are standing nicely, defending and covering the important squares, and then white can start play on the queen side, maybe with b4 and c4, or with the center also possible to play something like b4, queen b2, rook d1, or or rook b1. But anyway, the interesting thing is what happened after queen c8. Bishop h6. This might have been a little bit unexpected sacrifice, because obviously there is no direct threat. But it is very, very important to realize what happens after g takes h6, queen takes h6. The point here is that white wants to go knight f5. And after knight f5, bishop f5, ef5, the knight has to move from g6, and the knight on f6 is hanging. Fuchsia is saying that she remembers this game and it went very crazy, very fast. It is true, and Maxim played very fast as well, and his opponent actually played the same moves Maxim was doing, but it did not really work, because we know that tempo in chess is very, very important, and that's why what he was doing, it went really wrong. This is the position I want to emphasize, because after g takes h6 and queen takes h6, there is no piece which can defend the knight on f6. If the knight goes to h7, then after knight h5, black cannot defend the mate on g7. So it's a miracle position that there are so many pieces on the board, but nothing can help black to defend the f6 knight. And what I mean is that, for example, black plays queen c7. If we give one tempo to black, then after queen e7, everything would be fine. But after knight f5, bishop f5, e takes f5, knight has to move, and after knight f8, queen f6, white just won 2 pawns. Well done, Maxim, for spotting this opportunity. And after bishop h6, black played bishop h3. Also, the same thing goes if we take now on on h3, sorry, queen h3, and now it would be white who would be in trouble with the same thing, knight f4, bishop f4. Actually here not really, because after knight f4 and bishop f4, e takes f4, there is queen f4. But the thing is that after, let's say, bishop e3, knight g4 can be quite a strong move, because after knight g4 we have many threats of, let's say, knight h4 to kick this knight out and give some nasty checks on h2. This is not what happened in the game. After bishop h3, bishop g5 was played, and bishop g4, bishop f6, bishop f3. As I already mentioned, black is doing the same thing as white, but it doesn't really work, because after knight f5 we want to take on g7, and g takes f6 doesn't work because of queen h6, and we are threatening mate on g7. And after knight f5, knight f4 was played, but d takes e5, d takes e5, bishop e5, knight e2, rook e2, rook e5. If, let's say, bishop e2, it would not help black, because after queen g5, black cannot really avoid mate on g7. He could play g6, of course, but after queen f6, it's completely over. So after rook e2, rook e5 was played, and g takes f3. Maxim has just an extra piece, and the game was finished very soon. Let's go to another game and let's see how the world champion, ex-world champion Vladimir Kramnik was doing in his first game against Dai Changran. He was playing with black pieces and it went very interesting. The whole game was very interesting. There was a sacrifice of pawn. Vladimir Kramnik sacrificed an A pawn. So we see now that white has an extra pawn. But of course black has compensation because of two bishops and a little bit weakened kingside. And why I say a little bit weakened kingside you will see very soon, because something really bad happens to white in this game. It is very easy here to go wrong. The only thing that white could do is to go knight f3, bishop f4 and king f1. And let's say after bishop b5, queen b5 and queen a3, queen b1, white still has an extra pawn and there is no danger at all. But it would be pretty difficult to convert this as well, because this pawn on c file is not the passed pawn, it is on the c file and it's very difficult to move it if black blockades it well. But of course it would be white playing for two results and it would be either win or a draw. There is completely no fear of losing this game. But white went here knight b3, which is, I cannot say it is kind of logical move, but it is quite tempting one because it attacks the queen and it's a move with tempo. But actually the queen anyway wanted to go to c8, and now we see that white's pieces are not doing great on the queen side. Let's say queen a4, knight b5 and knight b3, they are all blocking each other, and it looks like now the king is quite alone on the king side. We have two bishops and there are some little threats of bishop h3, g takes h3, queen takes h3 and bishop f4. That's why white went king h2, and after bishop f4 g3 happened in the game, which was an obvious blunder. It was much better to go king h1, and you shouldn't be afraid of bishop h3 because you have f3, and this is the only way that white can think to play, because of course g takes h3, queen takes h3 would be a terrible mistake. There is a mate coming in 3 moves, a very nice famous maneuver to mate the king on f1. And after, let's say, bishop h3, f3, bishop d7, black has equal material now. He has the pawn back, and it's definitely much more pleasant for black to play this game if there was no knight d6, bishop a4, knight c8, bishop b3 trick. And I say the trick because white is actually sacrificing the piece, not because he wants to go d6, d7, it would be a mistake, but after c5 it is very difficult for black to kind of win this game, because the pawns on c5 and d5, they are very strong. And let's say if you want to play something like bishop e3 to advance the pawn on c6 and somehow blockade it afterwards, let's say bishop a4 right now, white would play either c7 or knight e7, and afterwards c7, c8 would be quite impossible to defend, and it would give white perfect drawing chances. So after bishop d7, you might think why actually f3, and why not knight d6 right away? But knight d6 would be a mistake because of queen g4, and then white is in real trouble. After f3, this is completely necessary to protect the g4 square and to control it, not to allow queen g4. And let's say if black wants to defend somehow the pawn on d6, let's say queen d7, then it would not be wise because the bishop would be trapped. Let's say queen a2 is a possibility to play, and the bishop cannot go anywhere. It has to be on h3, and now there is no move after queen a2. Next move is g takes h3, and actually white is doing perfectly fine. So after bishop f4, g3 was played with the idea to kick this bishop out from f4, but it doesn't really work because after bishop h3, knight d6, g takes h3. If not knight d6 and let's say white grabs the bishop on f4, then queen g4, queen g2 is unavoidable. So after bishop h3, knight d6, g takes, h takes g3, f takes g3, and queen g4, this is completely winning for black, and the game was finished quite shortly after knight f5, queen h5, g takes f4, bishop f5, king g3, queen g4, king f2, queen f4, and king e2, queen e4. It's completely winning for black, and I think white player did resign here. Okay, now let's see another game. I see in the comment defensive task was very difficult for white. Indeed, it was very difficult for white to defend it, but I think the main thing and main problem was knight b3 in this move. It's somehow about the intuition. You should feel where your pieces belong, because knight on b3 is not doing anything. It's just blockading the queen on a4, and then the queen does not have free squares to move, and you really need this knight on f3 to defend the king. Okay, now let's see another game, and this is the game of Aronian against Cowdery Daniel, who played a very brave game and who played really brilliantly. This was the game, and he even achieved advantage, I would say, in this position. I would really choose to be with black pieces here, because f4 is indeed a very great move. It emphasizes that the king is very weak, and it's not that easy for white to take care of his king. We have two bishops, I mean black has two bishops, and let's say after g takes f4, g takes f4, and e4, which happened in the game, there was a very nice Zwischenzug. Actually that's German, but we use it in chess anyway. I think in English it's called intermediate move, the check, which is bishop d4, and I would explain now what is the difference between this check and f3, which was played in the game. Also very interesting option for black, which also leads to a very sharp and complicated game, but more precise was to give a check on d4 here, because after king e1, king actually is forced to go to e1, and f3, e takes f3. Black has here a very brave move. It's not queen h2, it's not any other move, but it is rook b5, which kind of kicks the knight out from c5. Let's say knight a4, then simple bishop e6 with the ideas of queen h2, bishop h3, and queen c7 here doesn't really work because of queen a3 with the idea of rook c8, and it is very, very nice position for black here. I think black has advantage in this position. And what is the main difference between f3 and bishop d4? I will explain very shortly. After f3, e takes f3. If you give check now, queen h2 was played in the game, which was not a great move. But here, white has an opportunity to go king e2, which there wouldn't be able because the pawn was on e2. And if we do the same, let's say rook b5, knight a4, bishop e6, queen c7, and queen a3, if you put on engine here, he would really say that black still has an advantage, a little one, much less than in the position where the king was on e1, because there we had a very big threat of rook c8. But the position of white is like pieces are on c7, c1, g2, a4. They are not connected to each other, and black's pieces are great because two bishops make a great power. On e6 and d4, the rooks are also doing their job, and the queen is it's just fantastic to have this queen on a3, because the pawn on a2 is also in danger, and rook c8 is also the threat. But of course, it would be much better to have this position with king on e1 rather than on king on e2. But this is not what happened in the game, because it's very difficult to see the move rook b5. I see in the chat Aronian is just a beast, really, an Armenian lion. Doesn't Lavon mean lion? Don't know what the name means, but lately he's having a great tournament, so he's in great shape, and as I remember, he is actually number 2 in the live ratings. Okay, so f3, e takes f3, and queen h2 was played in the game. I cannot judge black player because it's very difficult to see rook b5 generally, and even this move, rook queen h2, is not a blunder because black has such powerful position. He always has compensation, and after queen h2, king e1, bishop d4, queen d2, bishop g8, this is what happened in the game, knight d7, and this is where black went very wrong, played rook bd8, just giving up the exchange, and after knight f8, rook f8, and rook c6, king h7, king d1, bishop f7, and knight f4, the game was finished very soon. Instead of rook bd8, it is absolutely necessary here, and it's not actually that difficult to see it, but it was time trouble, so you can always miss something in time trouble. But after queen g3 check, white has to go on d1, rook f3. This everything happens with tempos. Rook f3, queen f3, queen e2, or king c2. Just take, and rook d8. It's still advantage for black because of two bishops, and also the material is equal, and definitely white has some problems with the knight. He cannot actually take on c7, let's say rook c7, because after bishop e6, then this knight would be really trapped. Knight c5, just bishop g4, and if, let's say, king d2, then rook f8 and rook f2 is coming. So we see that both knights are having tough times. All right, this was a very interesting game which happened in round 1, and afterwards Levin beat again his opponent, so he won the match 2-0. And now let's go to Fabiano's game. This is the game, this is actually a tiny bit mysterious game, because this is the position where Solomon went wrong with a quite logical move. Let's see what the chat is, about what the chat is going. If Jababa was not inconsistent, he would easily have been in top 20 at least. Yeah, he's a great player, he has great talent, but he is not very stable. Levon played some quick moves to confuse his opponent. Levon is always blitzing out his moves actually, and I think it's his style to play very quick in the opening. Okay. So let's get back to the game and let's see what happened between Solomon and Caruana. It is very interesting position here. I think I would prefer to play black here already, because there is already f5 and e5 on the board, and there are always possibilities to play e4 and moves like this, or f4, knight f5. Generally there is a big attacking opportunities for black here. It would be logical to play here bishop b2, and this is what happened in the game. But if you put an engine here, you would definitely see the move rook b1, and you might think, what is the idea of rook b1? Okay, it's second option after bishop b2 to get out of this pin and to plan c5. But the difference is that after knight g6, c5, e4, knight d4, this is all very logical. Queen comes to attack to h4, c6, and bishop c8, rook e3, and somehow white is keeping the balance in this position, and rook h3 is there. It's very complicated, double-edged position. But the difference actually is that after bishop b2, same thing happened, knight g6, and it was played in this game knight e2, though it was necessary to play, if it was white's choice, to play c5, e4, knight d4, and the same thing, c6. Here black would have a very strong, sharp move, and I would like to ask you, what is your opinion? I already revealed that the move is very strong here, so obviously there is no bishop c8 going backwards, but actually black has a very strong jump to grab the initiative and grab the advantage as well. So I'll wait for some seconds to see in chat what is going on in your mind, and afterwards I'm gonna reveal what is the move. What do you think? What can be black's idea here? What black should play, and how would you continue the game? This is a very important moment, not to allow the initiative to go away, and somehow to grab it. It is indeed very difficult, so you might take a little time, but because I have lots of games ahead, still I would already show you the move, and it is knight g5, an amazing move. And now we see the difference, that the bishop is not on c1, but it went to b2, and now white cannot actually grab the knight on g5. So here in this position, if we had rook on b1 and bishop on c1, knight g5 would not work, because after c takes d7, bishop e5 and g3, on queen h3 we would simply take on g5. But in this position, after knight g5 and cd, then bishop e5 is there, g3, queen h3, we want to take on d4, and knight f3, and if let's say knight ce2 defending the knight on d4, then after knight h4, g takes h4, it is mate on h2 and knight h3. But if you don't take on h4, then after knight f4 to defend the mate on g2, bishop f4, g takes f4, and queen g2. This is indeed a very complicated lines, and of course I am completely sure that Caruana saw moves like knight g5 and then knight h4. It is very obvious and natural that you don't pay attention to the material when you can mate your opponent. Knight g6, knight e2 was played in the game, but after knight g5, knight g3, take, and e4, queen b3, take on b2, and queen g5, black grabbed the initiative, grabbed the advantage, and slowly but surely won a very smooth game. Afterwards, Caruana also won another game, so he won the match with 2-0. What's your opinion on the future of chess in Georgia? I hope that it's going to be a bright future, because generally chess is very popular in Georgia, and we're hosting many events, important events. We'll be hosting Olympiad next year in Batumi, and that's a great opportunity for my generation, for new generation, to know about chess, because I have a little feeling that it was more popular in Vachier-Lagrave time, Chuberdanidze time. Everybody had chess set in at their home, and everybody knew how to play chess. But nowadays school became more tough, and it became more tough generally to combine studying and chess all together. So it became more and more difficult for families and for individuals to really go for chess and not for let's say education, because nowadays when I was going to school and to university, if I was absent for let's say 10 days, it was kind of forgiven because I was at the tournament. I would pass the exams, and as long as I passed the exams, it was all great. But nowadays, if you're absent for 10 days, you're out of school or you're out of university. And when you have a child, you don't really want to have an, let's say, uneducated kid, because you don't really know what's going to be the future of his or her in chess. So that's why I think it became more and more difficult for families to decide that they want to have chess professional children if they really don't see the big talent. But I hope that with these events we would have chess in schools. We already have chess in schools, but just generally it would become more and more popular, and people would believe in chess much more than nowadays. All right, let's go to the next game, and this is the game of Liu Guanchu against Mamedyarov, who is playing with black pieces. And this is the position where I want to show what went wrong for white here. At first glance, it seems that all is okay. White pieces are developed, but actually white pieces are developed not on good squares. This is the case where you need to regroup, and you need to regroup in a smart way. White decided to regroup here with knight b3, queen e7, and queen d2. which was kind of decisive mistake in the game, because the knight was completely necessary on d2 to protect the e4 pawn. Once the knight went on b3, knight b3, queen e7 and queen d2, very strong move, bishop b4, emphasizing that this girl here on e4 is not doing great. e5 was played in the game, and after rook d8, e takes f6, queen takes f6, and knight d5, this was the move, because if, let's say, queen f2, then rook d1, obviously knight d1 runs into bishop c4, and black is winning. But after rook d1 and rook d1, black is doing great as well. He can grab either on f4 and, let's say, bishop b3, ab, knight f4, or on c3, and it would be just pawn up for black. So in this position, it was completely necessary to hide this queen with queen d3, queen e7, queen e2, rook d8, a3, rook f8, h3. This type of moves, which you don't really see the kind of big plan in them, but obviously they are nice moves to make, nice waiting moves, and all pieces are standing so far okay. Queen f2, rook e1 can be played next, and white would be doing okay in this game. But once again, regrouping here with knight b3 was bad idea, because the e4 pawn, which is now tiny bit difficult to imagine that this pawn would have problems on e4. After queen e7, you definitely want to move your queen, and if, let's say, queen d3, again problems with rook f8, queen e2, and bishop b4 is there. How do you measure talent? There is no real way to measure the talent, I guess, but definitely there are things like if your child wants and has an urge of playing chess all the time, reading books, himself is very interested to play chess, then you definitely have to take care of the first steps, and you definitely have to pay more attention rather than if you yourself want your child to play chess. For example, when I started to play chess, when I was acquainted to chess, I told this story several times. I think that my mother is actually a chess player, but she kind of didn't really care if her children would play chess or not. I have two elder sisters, and none of them are playing chess. But I was on vacations with my grandma, and she taught me how to play draughts, and it was with chess pieces, and I was like, what are the other pieces for? Why you're not using all of them? And she told me that this is chess, your mother was playing, and she told me these stories, like how my mom was playing the tournaments, going abroad, how she was accompanying, and it got me really interested. And I remember actually having really urge to know what was this board game about, and my mother is telling me that I wanted to play chess so much that I was going to sleep with a chessboard in my hands, telling her that I really want to play chess. This is how I started to be in this amazing game. Okay, let's see another game which is very, very nice game from Yo Lee, who drew Anand in in second game. Anand won a very smooth first game, and obviously draw would be enough for him to qualify to second round. And when you're playing this type of tournaments, you don't really care about the results. As long as you qualify, all is fine. But actually in this position, Yo Yeo, or I don't know how to pronounce his name, Tian, I would call him. He played an amazing game. It was obviously that he has such great talent. After rook b1, he played the move e5, which is a brave move to sacrifice the pawn, just because there is one idea which is not very easy to spot. After e5, d takes e5, you might think that, what is this move for? Are we going to advance d4 pawn? No, there is knight d4. How am I going to, if I had rook on d8, then it would make sense because I would push d4. But what happens now? The idea now that was great is rook h3. And I was like, wow, that's a great sacrifice. Wow, the guy found everything that is necessary to find in this game. Rook h1, obviously, king h3, rook h6, king g2, rook h2, king f1, rook c2 would be very, very bad for white because, let's say, b4, we don't even care about this pawn, we can even go a4, b5, and afterwards moves like rook h2, I want to go c2, and d4, let's say b6, you might think that, what am I doing? Isn't this guy going there? But after c2, rook a1, and bishop e5, the game is over. You cannot take on e5 because simple rook h1 wins. And say if white didn't allow this move and played on c2, sorry, e6, then black would just go here, rook a1, and it's not that important that we didn't take the pawn on e5. It's important that the pawn on b6 is not advancing, and after d4, d3, it's unstoppable for black. Actually, white cannot stop black's pawns to advance d3, d2, and if you put an engine here, it will say, I don't know, minus 60 or minus 70, so it's really over, this game. So after d takes e5, rook h3, and rook h1 was played in the game, and after rook h1, here was the moment that Tian missed, and it was a great opportunity for him to qualify for tie breaks, to actually beat the living legend tiger from Madras, as they call him, Vichy Anand, the ex-world champion. He went here for bishop e5, which is completely understandable because if you have the pawn to grab, you would go for it. You have strong c3 pawn, you have d4, d3 going, and you have everything to win the game. But with these tiny mistakes, it gets together, tiny mistake here, tiny mistake there, and then the advantage goes like this, because we know that Vichy is a great defender and he would not give up so easily. It was completely necessary to play here rook b6, and the idea, of course, is that I want to take on b3 and play rook b2. Rook b1 would not help because after rook h6, rook h1 taken, bishop e5, this is indeed completely winning for black, as there are no rooks already on the board, and then this d4 and d3 would win the game. But after rook b6, b4, let's say, then a takes, and rook h6, again the idea rook a2 is very, very bad for white, and actually it's just over for white. So here, after rook b6, we can definitely say that black was winning on the spot, because if you cannot defend the pawn on b3, then what can you do? You cannot really attack the c3 pawn, and after rook b3, rook b2, it's just over because the king is bad also, and we have a very strong, super strong bishop on f4. But after bishop e5, white was in time to play king e2, rook b6 now, b4 take, and if here now rook a6, which was completely winning in that position, then king e3, and it's not that easy anymore. Of course, it's an advantage for black, but it's not that easy anymore. That's why, let's say, after AB, he played bishop d6, king e2, bishop b4, king d3, bishop e7. Still an advantage for black, but after you lose this pawn on c3, bishop f6 and king d2, it's not easy anymore to convert this into a point, and then of course ex-champion held this position easily, and it was ended in a draw. Very great opportunity and chance missed by black player. He did everything great. We have to give him credits for moves like e5, take, and rook h3. Brilliant sacrifice to see that king h3, and you have this these pawns on c3 and d5 and d4 coming. It's just amazing, but it's a pity that after rook h1, he did not play rook b6 right away, but played bishop e5 first. Crucial tempo. Losing a tempo is very crucial, because we saw already that king f2, rook b6 now is not that strong anymore, because after take and ab, rook a6 and king e3 would just give white a chance to save himself. All right, now let's go and see what a very strong player Wesley did after he won his first game, very smooth game against Ruiz Castillo. This is a very interesting position. Of course, draw was enough to qualify, and the game actually finished in draw, but Wesley had some good chances to convert this game as well into a point. Here he played a very interesting move, bishop h3. And this is indeed a top kind of player move. Leaving this knight on e5, is it a good idea? Of course it is, because after, let's say, f takes e5, it is completely losing for black. Take on e6, take on h8, take on e5, bishop c6, just to kick this queen out, queen g4, and knight c4, bishop d4. We did not regain the material, and we did not give mate yet, but look at black's pieces. They are all standing very passive, and just move like, I don't know, queen h5, bishop f7, e6 is just over for black. You cannot do anything about this position as black, because even if I don't play on mate, and even if I don't play on anything, e4 is coming. For example, b3 is a threat, so if you're gonna take this pawn on b2, I don't care about the rook. Again, we are not going to play move like rook d2, but instead bishop f5, very strong move, and knight d1 would not work because of e6. I know that it's not that obvious for now what are we doing, but on bishop f6, after queen h5, again there is a huge threat on h7. So how are you going to protect it? Only way is queen e7, and now we can take on f6, rook f6, and the great knight d5. So you see lots of sacrifices on at this point. Bishop d5 of course would be bad due to check on c8, and after, well, king g7, it's just queen h7 mate, and after rook f8, again just rook f8, king g7, king, queen h7, king f8, and queen h8. Very beautiful, indeed a brilliant, sharp line, I would say. To see this and to go for it, you have to be definitely a top player, because what's actually difficult for me is that I love tactics, I love sacrifices, but I love when it's obvious, when I have something obvious. And in this position, after take and king h8, take on e5, it is obvious that white has great advantage and white has definitely a compensation. But if you would ask me, I would not tell you that computer will be saying +5 here. I would think that, okay, maybe like +1 or something. But that's why I'm not a top player, and that's why we are learning from top players. And this is amazing, this line with bishop c6. Go through it once again, because it's very important not to think about material. Knight e2, yes, I am losing the knight. Yes, I already don't have the piece, but my pieces, these two bishops, are great and they are very powerful. We are using the fact that the pieces on the queen side are not active yet, and they cannot jump in one tempo to defend the king side. That's why we play bishop f5 to advance e6. We sacrifice this guy on d1 again, and after e6, obviously king g8 would be a mistake because of easy bishop h7, king h7, here check and mate. Lots of sacrifices, lots of beautiful lines, and after bishop f6, again this very straightforward queen h5, queen e7, take, and very strong knight d5 in the end. Actually, if you don't have knight d5 here, then it's completely lost position, so it is easy to miss this moves and not to calculate it till the end. But these top players, they have good intuition, good feelings about the position, and that is why that we have such brilliant games for World Cup and generally for us. Alright, so bishop h3, f5 was played in the game, and again we see that now what white achieved is that there is no more f6 in the position, so we have great forepost on e5, and now Wesley just went back, bishop g2, and that's indeed a great advantage already, that there is nothing bothering this knight on e5. But I have to mention that after bishop h3, it was completely necessary for black to go knight f5, and on knight d3 just king g7, and the game would remain quite complicated, and it would be still a great fight. It was another important moment here after bishop g2, knight f7 was played. I would quickly go to the position where I think it is important to stop. So knight c7, rook c7, knight e5, d takes e5, and rook b8 happened in the game. And here once again another tactic would have a chance to be in the game. But when you have a score of 1-0 in the match, and you think that, okay, I'm not gonna take much risks, and draw is enough, so I'm gonna play it safe, then you play move rook dc1 and rook f7 and bishop d2, something like this. You kind of go for trades, you play it safe, and then the game ends in a draw, which you're not upset about it, you're quite happy, but of course point would be much more pleasant. After rook b8, I'm completely sure that Wesley has seen the move rook b7, a very strong sacrifice once again. And when you see the move rook b7, and bishop d5, if Wesley was in such situation that he was in a must-win situation, then of course he would go for it. But I think that he did not need any kind of complications with the line, let's say bishop d5, rook c7, bishop e6, king h8, and bishop d4. Again, once again, it's not obvious okay, actually it is obvious that white is having great compensation because of the weak king on the king side, too powerful bishop, and again a very strong pawn on e5. But if you're having a 1-0 in the match, once again I am repeating myself, you want to play it safe and you don't want to give any chances. Of course he has seen it, and of course he thought that that should be good for white, but why to complicate the matters, and why not to go for calm lines. Now let's take a look what was the great about this rook b7. Rook b7. So now 7 should be played, because otherwise we would have a piece. Bishop d5. You cannot take obviously on d5, because then white wins the piece. This guy hanging. And after bishop d5, rook c7, and bishop e6, what white achieved? White achieved to open up his two bishops, which is very important when you have two bishops. White achieved to gain two pawns for exchange, so it is full compensation materially also. You have exchange and with two pawns, and white achieved to have great attack on the king side as well, just because the pawns on f5 and g5 are advanced. If the pawn was on f7, then bishop e6 wouldn't be valid, but let's say somewhere, let's say g6, g7, then it wouldn't be that great. But the pawns are on f5 and g5, and because of this, white has great compensation. Materially equal, two pawns for an exchange, weak king, and two powerful bishops. This bishop is so amazing on e6. It controls all light squares and is dominating on the board. So once again, king h8 and bishop d4 is great for white, but of course Wesley chose to play it solid and drew the game and qualified for the next round. Now let's see another top player, Alexander Grishuk. He won this game with, let's say, he won this game here with rook a1, and knight c6 was played in the game. And knight c6 was actually a mistake, because you have to somehow play rook c6 and defend this a6 and e6 pawns like this. But knight c6 was going to take the pawn on b4, and it was very, very nice idea here to play rook c1, king f6 to defend the pawn on e6, knight f3, knight a7, rook a1, rook c6, and a very good rook a5 wins the e5 pawn, if not knight b5, king g2, let's say rook b6, and a very nice g4 idea. This was the position actually I wanted to show you, because here you might think that, okay, what is white doing, because I have everything done, everything defended. But g4 is very nice, because after hg, g5 was threat to win the e5 pawn, then knight h2 wins the game, because you cannot defend knight g4 and knight e5. So this was what I wanted to show you. There were some very mysterious decisions made in many games. Let's say Peter Svidler against Vachier-Lagrave against Peter Svidler. He played here b6, and not really understandable why he didn't take on b6, queen b6, cb6, bishop d6, not to allow bishop f4. And here a very strong, impressive, there are many ways to play. Okay, not a lot of ways, because let's say castle here would be bad due to bishop a6, rook e1 and rook b8. I think black has advantage, because if he gains this pawn on b6, it would be just 2 bishops advantage. But here a very strong king e2. You might think, what the hell is this move? Because bishop a6 is with tempo, king e3, march to the center, rook b8, and a very important, very nice, I like this move very much, bishop a3. And the idea, of course, is that if you take bishop a3, then rook a1, rook b6, and rook a3, it's just equal endgame. So even if white player did not see queen b6, cb, and bishop d6, this move king e2, he could play knight e5, bishop a6, bishop f4, with the idea of knight d7 on rook b8. Let's say rook b8, knight d7, bishop f4, knight b8. And it is true, black has 2 bishops for the rook, but there is a pawn, and it's definitely white is not worse. Instead, in the game, bishop f4 was played, and after take and f6, black had a very good advantage, and Peter won the game very smoothly afterwards. The same happened actually here. It was amazing, this game. Elyanov, he got eliminated by Alexander Lenderman, who was very brave and lucky as well, because he was completely losing in this game. Elyanov should have played here f4, and this is completely winning on the spot, just because after g takes f4, g takes f5, take, and king f3, king is coming to f4, and slowly but surely white is grabbing all pawns on the king side and advancing his extra pawns. Instead, d5 was played, and many complications went. I would very quickly what happened till the blunder. Game. Sorry. And here it's amazing that even on this high level top players, because of maybe energy, pressure, because of many reasons, they can blunder things like this. It was completely necessary to play here king f2, having 2 extra pawns, easy to win this game. But Elyanov played rook e2, completely missed knight e3, the idea that he cannot go back rook d2, rook d4, rook d4, and knight c2 ended the game, because he did not play rook d2 on this move, but after knight e3, e7, and king f7, obviously king e7 would be bad because of knight f5, king f7, it was necessary to queen here, pin this knight, and then take on e3, take, and play knight f5, rook b6, just king e2, and we use the fact that you cannot take on b5 because of knight d6. You cannot take on b5, and let's say you play king d7, king e3, you still cannot take on b5, because then the pawn on h6 is hanging b5, knight h6, it's an easy draw for white. But surprisingly, he did not even play this, but after knight e3, e7, king f7, he played a terrible move, rook d2, and resigned after rook d4, with the idea rook d4 and knight c. resigned in this game. And next game he was in a must-win situation. He overpushed and he sacrificed the pawn. Lenderman did not get afraid to take the pawn, accept the sacrifices, and eventually won the match 2-0. Same happened in the game of Erdos Emin, and afterwards it was tie breaks. This is the game where actually Amin Bassam could win the match because the first game was draw. Let's say after Rook A8, which was played in the game, easiest was to go Rook B4, then E4, Knight D5, King D5. You have 2 extra pawns, but instead H3 could be played on King D4 and King D6, but instead A3 happened in the game with a trick and a trap that white could not take on A3, but probably it completely came as a cold shower to Amin that after A3, white immediately took on A3, Rook H3, went King E4, and after Rook A3 it was a stalemate. It was a stalemate, and it's indeed very, very surprising what happened in this game. It's like saying ghosts or something like this, and it was completely shocking for Amin. Later in the tie breaks, I think he lost it, and Erdos qualified to the second round. And actually in 1.5 hours we will be following again the second round games, and it's gonna be very, very interesting. I'm wishing Anish best of luck. He's playing against Mamedyarov. He actually played Mamedyarov in the last World Cup in Baku, so let's see now how it will go and what it will happen. But I'm definitely keeping my fingers crossed for him. How can these blunders be explained? Yeah, I agree to Fuxia, huge psychological pressure, or it just can happen some kind of mind shutdown or something like this. It's like I don't even know how it can be explained. This type of blunder like A3 can be explained that you didn't the King E4 idea, because this is not very often what can happen in this, what you kind of meet very often. It's not common, this type of ideas, but I cannot really explain let me show you. I cannot really explain what happened to in Svidler game, for example, why he did not take on B6, or what happened to I think it was Buxianji game. Yeah, I cannot really explain this game. It is white was playing with blue was playing with white pieces, and he played A4, and this is for me very, very difficult to explain what happened in this game, what he missed, what kind of hallucination he had. He played B5, and it's very difficult for me to understand what he missed. Afterwards I even asked Anish like what it is possible to miss here, and he told me that probably it was his hallucination. He only considered to play here AB, and you cannot take knight B5 because of B5, or okay, after exchanging like queen A7 and rook A7, AB, you cannot also take CB because of bishop. So probably he thought that it was kind of, he only considered AB, but he completely missed. C takes b5, a takes b5, b5, and he cannot do anything because after bishop b5 this guy is hanging on c8, and after ab knight b5 b7, but this does not help again because after e5 the game is over and he even resigned. So these kind of things can happen even in such important tournaments, and actually it happens more in this type of tournaments because you have a great psychological pressure. I played myself 2 times in World Championship cycle, and I can tell you that it's a huge pressure. You're nervous, you have only 2 games, either you go all in or you're out, so it's indeed very difficult to play this type of system and this type of tournament. For now, that's it, what I wanted to cover and what I wanted to play. There are much more interesting games, of course, and there have been much more interesting stuff, but they were all covered in articles and in other stuff, but I think I've covered all important key positions and some kind of sharp lines that I found very beautiful. I hope that you enjoyed it as well. I will be back after the tie breaks, second round tie breaks, to recap the second round. It's going to be much less games. Instead of 64 games, we would have actually not 64 but much more than 64, 128 games. We would have now 64 games because of 2 classical games, yeah, Let Me Win is asking, what about Anish's games? He played a very nice game against Nana Zagnidze. Probably I was the only Georgian who was supporting my husband in Georgia and not her, but of course I would go for my husband's support. He played a very nice game with a very interesting exchange sacrifice, but it was covered in many videos, it was covered in many articles. That's why I didn't show you his game. Also, I read a comment that I have a picture, let me show you here, with Anish's in the middle, and I read a comment that I'm exaggerating that Anish is in the middle, but I don't have anything to do with this picture anyway. But generally it was very nice game what he played. If you did not check, you should definitely check the positional exchange sacrifice. It was not like you're getting something right away, but he just slowly but surely was putting pressure on his opponent, and eventually he managed to win a very nice game. Anyway, I'm looking forward to today's round. I'm very excited that this event is held in Georgia, and I'm able to be here till the end of the finals, and I'm able to follow it live and not online, and I hope that it will go all great. I hope that you will also enjoy today's games, and hopefully you enjoyed my choice of games, and stay tuned. I will be back after tie breaks, round 2 tie breaks, and we'll recap the round 2. Wish you a very nice day. I'm heading to the playing hall, and I'm heading to wish my husband good luck. Bye bye.